This program is one of a series which accompanies the General Electric LM2500 instructions for the replacement of the duplex fuel nozzles and is designed as a supplement to the printed work package found in the maintenance manual. On the industrial model of the LM2500 gas turbine, 30 duplex fuel nozzles are mounted onto the compressor rear frame. They are attached by the primary and secondary fuel feeder tubes to the primary and secondary fuel manifolds, respectively. Each duplex fuel nozzle also is attached by a nozzle tube hose to the gas fuel manifold, which is held in place by 6 hinged brackets and 6 loop clamps. The removal procedure is identical for each one of the 30 pairs of fuel nozzles. It may be necessary to remove some of the outer piping, clamps, and electrical leads in order to gain better access to the fuel nozzles. Here, one of the nozzle tube hoses has been removed to provide a better angle of view. First, remove the safety wire from the primary and secondary fuel feeder tube connectors. If the nozzle tube hose is to be removed, cut the safety wire from the bolts holding the hose to the large gas fuel manifold. Next, remove the 2 bolts, nuts, and washers that hold the nozzle tube hose to the dual fuel nozzle. Remove and discard the O-ring. Now, the 2 bolts that hold the other end of this hose to the gas fuel manifold may be loosened to turn this hose out of the way. If this hose is to be removed for inspection or replacement, then remove these 2 bolts as well as the O-ring and cap the opening in the manifold. Using the special wrench set 2C6081, disconnect the fuel feeder tube connectors from the fuel nozzles and from the fuel manifolds. If this tool set is not available, another wrench may be substituted. Disconnect the secondary fuel feeder tube connection from the fuel nozzle. Do the same with the primary fuel feeder tube. Then, disconnect the secondary tube connector from the secondary fuel manifold. And the primary tube connector from the primary fuel manifold. Take care to avoid excessive twisting of these narrow tubes. Label these tubes and store them safely aside. To remove the duplex fuel nozzle itself, first, cut the safety wire from the bolts holding the nozzle into the compressor rear frame. Then, remove each of these 3 bolts. Now the duplex fuel nozzle may be withdrawn from the compressor rear frame. It should be removed carefully to avoid any damage to the nozzle tip. When the fuel nozzle has been removed, discard the metal ring seal and cap the opening in the compressor frame. The duplex fuel nozzle should be placed in a plastic bag and be tagged with the number corresponding to the nozzle's position on the engine, aft looking forward and counting counterclockwise. In this example, the nozzle was removed from the number 3 position. To prevent clogging or contamination, make sure that the openings on the primary and secondary manifolds are capped also. If the nozzle tube hose is to be inspected or replaced, remove the 2 bolts securing the hose to the gas fuel manifold. Remove and discard the O-ring and cap this opening. removal procedure for the duplex fuel nozzle is complete. To install the duplex fuel nozzle onto the LM2500 gas turbine, first place a new metal ring seal onto the nozzle mounting surface. If the same nozzle is to be installed, check the position number on the tag and remove the nozzle from the bag. Otherwise, install a new fuel nozzle. Position the dual fuel nozzle on the compressor rear frame mounting flange with 3 bolts. These bolts should be torqued to 55 to 70 inch-pounds. When installing the nozzle tube hose, first lubricate a new O-ring and install it onto the mounting surface of the gas fuel manifold. Then install the hose there, using 2 bolts to hold it in place. Next, lubricate another O-ring for the hose to nozzle connection. Secure this end of the hose to the duplex fuel nozzle with 2 bolts, washers, and nuts. Torque these nuts to 55 to 70 inch-pounds. Make sure that there is adequate clearance among the nozzle tube hoses and between the hoses and igniters. Safety wire the 2 bolts together at the gas fuel manifold. Also, safety wire the 3 fuel nozzle bolts together at the compressor rear frame. Now, the primary and secondary fuel feeder tubes may be reattached to the duplex fuel nozzle. Using the 2C6081 wrench set, reattach the primary tube to the fuel nozzle fitting and to the primary fuel manifold. Also, reattach the secondary fuel feeder tube in the same way. Tighten these couplings with the special wrench. When tightening and torquing these narrow tubes, take precautions to avoid bending the tubes or rubbing them together. Torque the primary feeder tube connector at the dual fuel nozzle fitting to 120 to 135 inch-pounds. Torque the secondary feeder tube connector at the fuel nozzle fitting to 160 to 180 inch-pounds. Torque the feeder tube connectors at the primary and secondary fuel manifolds to 120 to 135 inch-pounds. Then, safety wire the connectors to each other. The replacement of the duplex fuel nozzle is complete. For a printed description of this procedure, refer to the work package found in the maintenance manual for the industrial model of the General Electric LM2500 gas turbine.